Motion pictures, a revolutionary invention. No matter their form and no matter their subject, movies have made it possible for many people in many cultures to share their experiences. I think we are all changing the way we think about how we are entertained, and I think our culture has become much more visually oriented as a result of motion pictures. Motion pictures revolutionized Americans and people globally. It gave people something to turn to in times of grief, and it made people think, dress, and act differently. Reeling into the 20th century, the global motion picture revolution. The first successful motion picture was created when California Governor Leland Stanford asked photographer Edwin Muybridge to settle a bet, showing that horses lifted all four hooves off the ground while running. Muybridge set up 24 cameras on the track, and as the horse ran by, photos were taken. When the photos were put together, a moving picture was made. In 1910, many filmmakers relocated to California due to the cheap land and labor. By 1925, 50 million people a week went to the movies. One of the first American feature films, Birth of a Nation, demonstrated the popularity and power that movies could have. The film also showed that huge profits could be made, bringing in about $18 million in revenues. The Depression in the 1930s hit Hollywood hard, but they still managed to recoup their profits through a variety of methods, such as raffles or giveaways. Even the promise of just a little bit of money was a big draw for impoverished Americans. 60 to 80 million Americans attended the movies each week. Throughout most of the Depression, Americans went devotedly, almost compulsively, to the movies. The movies offered a chance to escape the cold, the heat, and loneliness. They brought strangers together, rubbing elbows in the dark of movie palaces and flea pits, sharing in the one social event available to everyone.
The motion pictures have revolutionized the way Americans look at the world, the way they dress, the way they act, the way they involve themselves in relationships.
It has made entertainment available to the masses, widens their experiences.
While the American motion picture industry was growing, motion pictures began spreading beyond American borders and revolutionized the economics and cultures of foreign countries. Asia's film industry influenced other industries such as America's. For example, Japanese action films influenced America's Kill Bill 1 and 2 movies, and Bollywood influenced the American film Moulin Rouge. Sundance Film Festival director Jeff Gilmore said, "If you ask me where in the last decade and a half the world's greatest filmmakers have come from, there's one simple answer: Asia." Bollywood is one of the largest centers of film production in the world. Filmmaking in Bollywood can be traced back to 1896, when the Lumiere brothers unveiled films in Bombay. But the Indian film industry didn't really start until 1899, when Harishchandra Bhadvatkar filmed and played 2 short films in a kaleidoscope. On May 13, 1913, Dada Saheb Phalke released the film Raja Harishchandra. In 1956, Satyajit Ray's film Padar Panchali put Indian cinema on the world map, winning 2 awards at the Cannes Film Festival. Film historians regard the period after India's independence as the golden age of Indian cinema. More recently, India's filmmakers have used films to support political change. For example, residents of Dharavi, where part of Slumdog Millionaire was shot, used the film to help them pressure their government to support their rights and continue to redevelop the area. India's influences include Hollywood from the 1920s to 50s, when musicals were popular. Meanwhile, in China, films were also influenced by elements from Hollywood, such as fast pacing and editing. The elegant, gravity-defying choreography of China martial art films has become the universal language of action movies everywhere. The Chinese film industry was based in Shanghai because of its access to foreign materials and cooperation of the Chinese and foreigners. A decade after the Lumiere brothers dazzled Paris with their moving pictures in 1895, director Jun Qingtai produced China's first motion picture, The Battle of Jinzhunshan. Since then, motion pictures have become one of the most prominent forms of entertainment in China. By 1916, Shanghai, the biggest city in the Far East, was home to a growing film industry. Influences on the worldwide film industry included the 1931 formation of the National Film Censorship Committee, as well as Japanese aggression towards China. In September 1931, the Japanese invasion of Manchuria made film's fantasy and entertainment irrelevant. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, anti-Japanese films enjoyed an increase in popularity. Communists began campaigning to ban American films in China. By October 1950, American films were no longer in China. In return, the government replaced American films with European films. Japan was different. When they were expanding its empire, the Japanese government saw cinema as the perfect propaganda tool to show people the glory of the empire. In the early 1900s, the Japanese began to feel the influence of two Western inventions, the comic strip and the motion picture. In 1914, cartoonists began experimenting with animated films. Japan's first successful film was Kitayama Satoru's Momotaro. In America, animated films were shown to be just as popular as live films, inspiring the man who is credited with the success of anime, Osamu Tezuka. Tezuka became interested in cartoons and created his first work, Shintakara-jima. Tezuka created his characters using inspiration from Disney cartoons such as Mickey Mouse. After the Great Earthquake in 1923, movies became even more popular. The disaster had made the audiences ready for light entertainment, for a way to pass time. In 1956, Toei Animation was created in hopes of producing animated features similar to Walt Disney, and their first film, The Tale of the White Serpent, was published. Until the late 1950s, movies were the dominant form of entertainment in Japan. At its peak, cinema attendance in Japan numbered over 1 billion a year, which means every man, woman, and child went to the cinema at least 10 times a year. Cinema played a huge part in keeping people entertained and happy after Japan's defeat in World War II, when the country was impoverished and crippled by a decade of warfare. However, motion pictures didn't always have a positive reaction. I sometimes worry that the violence in many films generates violence in the larger world. There is a relationship between what one sees on the screen and how one acts in the real world.
They can give people unrealistic expectations about their lives.
Also, censorship was a big issue. Censorship began during the 1920s. Murder, arson, robbery, intimate activity, and profanity were censored.
And in 1934, Will Hayes was a man who came to Hollywood to show people the difference between right and wrong, and all of a sudden the code was imposed. Everything was segregated.
Could a tough process even be positive? I think what was interesting is the positive impact censorship has had. Creative filmmakers found ways to suggest what could not be openly filmed. This led to forms that rest their meanings in metaphors. Overall, motion pictures significantly revolutionized both Americans and people globally. It not only changed people's lives, but it also changed worldwide entertainment industries.
I think it broadens their knowledge of the world, particularly I think with documentaries.
Watching motion pictures, both dramas and documentaries, have expanded my world.